Here with reaction is Florida Senator Marco Rubio is with us. Senator, do you see a correlation between the rhetoric of, say, Chuck Schumer? He's on the steps of the Supreme Court. You'll be hit the likes of which you've never been hit before. His comments. Do you see a correlation to the animosity, hostility, and doxing of these justices?
Yeah, I have a terrible feeling about this, Sean. I think this is headed in a very dangerous direction. I think the last time I was on this show from this very studio, I said that at the time. And here's why. This is a country of 331 million people, okay? You have people out there basically saying that these members of the Supreme Court are equivalent to the Ku Klux Klan, to Nazis. You've had some sort of saying burn the place down. 331 million people. It only takes a couple of them to look at that and say, well, if these people are that evil, the next step is to just take them out. And that's just the Supreme Court justices. Not to mention we've got hundreds of members of Congress that don't have U.S. Marshals outside their home. And, we want to thank the U.S. Marshals for the role they played, or we would be having a very different day here today in Washington. But this is an incredibly serious thing. This is not the only guy in America with these thoughts in their head. And I have a very bad feeling about the direction this goes on either side. I'm not in favor of this happening to anybody. I don't want protesters showing them outside the house of Nancy Pelosi or Chuck Schumer or anybody else. I think there's a time, place, and manner for free speech to be regulated. You can say whatever you want, but there's got to be some limits to it. And in this particular case, it's illegal because these are judges that these people are trying to intimidate to make a decision that they want in a court case.
To me, that's straight-up harassment, intimidation of these 9 justices, or in this case, the 6 conservatives. My question is, what about posting the addresses, or doxing as they call it, and giving out the locations of where these people that serve in government live? Isn't that inviting this intimidation? Isn't that creating a hostile work environment, to use, well, some of the favorite words of woke liberals?
Well, there's only one reason for protesters to show up outside the home of a public figure, and that is to send them a clear message. We know where you live. Now, maybe there's 100 people there, and not a single one of those 100 people are going to hurt anybody. But I'm going to tell you, someone's watching, someone's taking down note on the internet where this person lives, and that one deranged person is going to show up at the house of someone and eventually harm them. This is an unfortunate trend that we're now seeing. It's a very, very dangerous one. We should not be playing with this. We are playing with fire. I'm not saying this guy wouldn't have done this anyway if he's truly as deranged as he appears to be. My point is that when you're encouraging this, when you're calling your political opponents people that have blood on their hands, people that are the same as the Ku Klux Klan, that are coming to rip your rights from you, you're going to have some people take some pretty violent, dramatic, and dangerous actions. And that's what was averted last night, thank God. But I don't think we've seen the last of this, unfortunately.
All right, so we're going to have this big Hollywood presentation, the January 6th committee, tomorrow night during this hour. I think some of it will still be going on. What's fascinating to me is we've actually gone back in time, and in the summer of 2020, Senator, we have 574 official riots. We had dozens of dead Americans. We had thousands of injured cops. We had billions of dollars in property damage. Very few people were held accountable, even though we had videotape evidence of people responsible for that. One, why is there no committee for looking into those instances? And two, I look at the Democrats, either they were silent, especially the ones on the committee, they were either silent about the summer of 2020, or they lied and say they were mostly peaceful when they were anything but peaceful. What does that tell you about their feigned outrage that we'll see on display tomorrow with their Hollywood production?
Sean, from day one, I've said that if people committed crimes on that day, they should be prosecuted and convicted by a jury and so forth. And that's what's happening. Okay, this is a Hollywood paid political advertisement. They hired a producer to put this thing on. Okay, the criminal justice system is already dealing with it. But here's what it says about it. It says that if you're a member of Congress and something terrible happens here on the Capitol grounds, like what happened on that day, they're going to put a fence up. They won't do that for our country, but they'll put a fence up. They still have metal detectors in the House chamber, so members have to go through these metal detectors. They'll do all these extraordinary things and mobilize the National Guard. But if you're among the hundreds of small businesses that got burned to the ground, the people that were killed, the people that were harassed, the people that suffered from that, well, then we don't care about that. That we're going to condone, that we're going to excuse, that we're going to have a now vice president raise money to bail people out of jail. Now we're going to have prosecutors that refuse to prosecute you. And by the way, it doesn't matter if you torched a police car, killed a security guard, did whatever you do. That's not as big a deal. It doesn't matter as much. And if you call out the National Guard or marshals or anybody else, that's nothing but the Gestapo. That's their attitude. It reveals hypocrisy, and the good news is people see it for what it is. That's why they're getting it handed to them all over the country, and why I think you're going to see that in November. Thank God as well.
Well, thank God for that as well. Your election is really crucial for the Republicans to keep control or get control of the Senate. I want to ask you specifically, so in the days leading up to January 6th, there was a meeting with President Trump in the Oval Office. There were 4 other people there. Chris Miller, the acting Secretary of Defense, Kash Patel as Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows was there, and General Milley, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, was there. At that meeting, 4 of the people, that would be the President, Mark Meadows, Kash Patel, Chris Miller, all told me on the record that Donald Trump authorized up to 20,000 troops to be used if, in fact, they had problems on January 6th. I was able to get in contact with people that are around General Milley, and they confirmed for me today in a phone call that, in fact, issues involving security in the days leading up to January 6th, he did discuss with the president. So the question is, once the president authorizes those guard troops, if they would have had 10,000 or 20,000, we wouldn't talk about January 6th. But the president then, the authority to call them up once he authorizes that as legally as required, then it goes to Nancy Pelosi and Muriel Bowser. They failed to call up those troops. My question is, how do you blame Donald Trump for that when it was their responsibility to take advantage of the resources he was offering them?
Well, if this was a real congressional hearing and not a kangaroo court and not a circus and not a made-for-TV production and an infomercial for their political purposes, those are the questions they would be asking. That's exactly what they would be asking. It would be a review of why didn't Capitol Police, why didn't the Sergeant-at-Arms take advantage of these resources that were available? That's what you would be focused on. But they're not going to be focused on that. This is they moved this thing to prime time. They hired a producer to put it on. This is not a fact-finding mission. This is a 2-hour free documentary sponsored by virtually every major network in America except for this one that's willing to give it airtime. The only good thing about it is most Americans aren't going to watch this garbage. I mean, people already know what happened that day. They're watching the Justice Department take heed of it.
There's not even one opposing voice. There's not even one person that would have asked the question of Muriel Bowser and Nancy Pelosi. You're right. It's like a kangaroo court. Senator, we're watching your re-election really closely. Thank you for being with us. Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.